This video is sponsored by the following people. Please click the links in the description below.
You ready? Next up, we're going to push this material down to create the tang. At the same time, we're going to create some more thickness right in the transition area between the heel of the blade and the transition into the tang. So the front of the handle, basically. It's important to also heat up the neighboring areas if you're using induction forge. In the gas forge you usually have a wider heat, but if you work with steels like ApexUltra, which are not completely easy to forge and you need to be a little bit more careful, you definitely should heat up the neighboring areas to avoid getting any stress cracks there. Now we have the isolation of the tang and the pre-shape of the blade done. Next, we're going to forge in the taper. We're going to draw out the tang as well as the blade and try to get the cross section as close to what we want as possible. I'm going to have a huge double chin on this shot. Next up, forging the length. When we have the pre-shape and the basic dimensions of the tang forged in, the material is isolated, then we will just drive out the entire material to the final length that we want. Forge in the taper, and at the last stage we're going to drive out the material at the joint area if we need it wider and make the whole bevel the total heights that we want. Back to the par. Basically, just drawing out the blade to the length that we want, getting the blade thickness. Then we're gonna forge out the rough shape of the blade. So we're gonna get not only the outside contour as close as possible, but especially we're gonna focus on the thickness of the spine on the cross section of the knife. So I wanna have a slight taper here in the front, and I wanna be very efficient with the material that I have, so I will move it in the right direction. We'll isolate the tang, we'll make a hidden tang construction, so we don't have the full shape of the full tang, but we will have only a stud, which will then disappear in the handle material. Speaking of the handle material, we're going to use Kingswood for the handle and some black paper micarta, which I already slotted in the front to make our construction fit up a little bit easier. Next, I will cut off part of the tang because that's where part of the weld seams are. I don't really need the length of the tang anyways. Then we're gonna finish out the blade, forge out the height of the blade. So that's all the tang length that we really need. Next up, I'm gonna forge a little bit of the blade height and draw out the heel. So this part of the knife is called heel or the keel. And this is usually where you need the most material to get the full blade width. Okay, so we drew out the heel as much as needed, and now we're gonna do the final shaping and forge in the bevels and get the total angle and the curve of the knife forged in. Again, I don't usually forge knives entirely by induction. Gas forge is more convenient for the knives, but I want to show that it's possible and that people who cannot have a gas forge or who do not want to burn fossil fuels, that they can actually make a pretty nice blade just using the induction heater. Okay, back to the anvil. So we now finished the rough shape of the blade. We have some extra material in the front and some extra material in the back. So we're gonna basically trace the outlines of the blade next, make sure that the entire blade is straightened out, but the rough shape is done. Now we're on to the final details, the tweaking and the outside contour. That's basically it with forging afterwards. Next thing we're gonna do is to roll in a taper. You could forge this by hand, you don't really need a rolling mill, but it's a very cool way that I found that I can produce a reproducible taper along the spine of the blade. So we're gonna get more narrow in the front, we're gonna go to 2 millimeters here and have around 3 millimeters here, and we can have a linear transition from front to back that is perfect. So basically we're going to close it all the way. Okay. Got something in my eye. Oh no! Okay, now I'm pretty happy with the overall shape. I'll compare it to my model, see if I have enough room everywhere. I don't care if the blade is a little bit too wide or a centimeter too long. We're just gonna cut off that. I prefer to have some extra material, especially on the sides, because what I focus on if I do a brute forged knife is the cross section of the knife. So you need some degree of freedom, and that is basically the outside parameter. I want to keep the forged surfaces on the spine or on the side of the knife. My cross section is the most imperative dimension. All right. Once we got the steel forged out to the rough shape, I'm gonna use the shear to hot shear the excess of the material off. It's gonna be still a little bit bigger than the final knife, but I will refine the contour on the grinder. With hot shearing you can save a lot of grinding belts and a lot of dust in your workshop. So I just do a rough profile and then I refine the profile on the grinder.
Thank you again for watching this video. If you have any topics that you want to discuss, we'd be more than happy to make the video just for you.